Concepts and Frameworks on Circular Economy, Copernicus Institute of Sustainable Development, Utrecht University. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this webinar dedicated to circular economy. Circular economy is often presented as something new. However, as some of you have already seen or read, it has already some time in our desks. We have been talking about this for quite a long time, perhaps with other names. So the essence of this webinar is that we want to transmit the message of avoiding reinventing the wheel and overlooking failed efforts of the past. This webinar has the following contents. We will tell you why is this slide deck about. We will discuss some views and definitions on circular economy. We will also talk about how to assess circularity, or what are the aspects that we consider important while assessing circularity. We'll talk about the role of business in the circular economy, also the governance aspects of the circular economy, and the current projects that the Copernicus Institute of Sustainable Development in Utrecht University has nowadays with regards to circularity. We would like to conclude this webinar with some message for policymakers and opportunities for collaboration for all of you that you are kindly attending this webinar. The purpose of this slide deck is to understand the development of circular economy. And in this sense, circular economy allows us to better situate the concept in both its historical context and its theoretical diversity. Also, we would like to have a better recognition of the plurality of circularity ideas that exist. As we have discussed previously, it's not a new concept, and therefore circularity is rich in ideas and in views from different disciplines and contexts. And also, we would like to think and communicate more clearly about how to shape a circular society, which is ultimately our goal. Also, we would like to achieve a common understanding of circular economy, because this is essential to the success of its implementation. How we will work, which value circularity will provide, how will benefit, right? And ultimately, who owns the process? When we talk about circular economy, who is responsible to implement circularity? Who is responsible to assess it? What are the risks that are present? And what we should include and we shouldn't include when discussing circular economy. Circular economy is taking an important space in the current discussion about sustainable development. And this is because our requirements of materials as society are increasing. In this slide, you can see that cement, steel, iron, paper are having a huge increase in the last decades. And the trend is still to continue, especially because cities are having an important growth as well. For those of you who studied chemistry, or that you are familiar with it, this slide shows the contribution or the increase of global recycling rates of some materials. And as you can see, most of the materials have low recycling rates. That means that we have a big opportunity to make our economy circular. Circular economy is mostly linked to recycling, as I just mentioned. However, it involves more than that. In this slide, we can see a usual supply chain of any product. For any product, we extract raw materials, we produce materials, we process them, then these materials are sold for consumption, and when we don't require them anymore, we throw them and they go as waste. This is called, or this is what has been called for some authors as the linear economy. The circularity comes when the waste that we have in different aspects of the value chain can be used. For example, from consumption, we can reduce materials and bring them back to extraction or where the materials are produced. But also, we can reuse them. If we talk about waste management, we can recycle waste, or which is called as downcycling. Of course, we can also demand and reduce our demand. This slide shows that there are many possibilities to make an economy circular. What we have just shown in the previous 3 slides is the background of why circular economy is necessary. It is necessary because we're increasing our material consumption, but it's also necessary because this consumption originates waste, and the waste can be used or reused in several parts of the value chain. However, it's important to stop here to discuss what we understand by circularity, what we talk about when we discuss circular economy. This is important because a definition of circularity will help us to frame future strategies to make a circular world. Before 2012, the views on circular economy were focused on 3 dimensions that perhaps most of you know, like reduce, reuse, and recycle. And the focus was on environmental quality and economic prosperity. After 2012, there was a shift in paradigm. And still, the dimensions are reduce, reduce, and recycle, but now we have a systems perspective. We try to analyze not only single units or single processes, but the whole value chain or the whole economy. And of course, we still want an economic prosperity. But as you realize, the big change is on systems perspective. We try to understand circularity along the various steps of the value chain and not only in one part. Besides that, we try to understand the impact that circular strategies have along the value chain and not only on the environment. The environment is relevant and is important, of course, but also societal aspects and economic aspects should be taken into consideration. We also can identify how different stakeholders that play an important role in our economic system have conceived circularity. For example, practitioners normally consider the dimensions reduce, reuse, and recycle, and there is a focus on economic prosperity. Whereas scholars, they tend to focus on systems perspective and on environmental quality. This distinction is important because we should understand that independently of where we are taking part in the economic system, we need to speak the same language. We need to understand each other. To achieve a circular society, and therefore other sustainability goals, we need to fundamentally change the way in which we produce and consume materials. We saw in the previous slides that we need to think in systems. We exactly don't know how to achieve this. This means that there is not a silver bullet. Unfortunately, there is not one recipe or one size fits all that will help us to make our economy circular. However, we know several things. We know that there is a lack of consistent definition across research and practitioners, as we just saw. We know that there is not enough stress on waste hierarchy. We know that there is emphasis on waste as only solution. But for example, energy requirements for recycling can be high. So if we only focus on recycling, thinking that this is the silver bullet, perhaps we have some trade-offs in energy consumption and requirements. We know that secondary material has lower quality. We could be working on that. Replacing fossil fuels by sustainably produced biomass can be a component of circular economy. There is a nexus with the energy system and the energy transition. And many current views on a circular economy lack societal considerations. This is a good starting point because at least we know what needs to be addressed if we want to achieve a circular economy. Researchers at the Copernicus Institute of Sustainable Development in Utrecht University have taken these considerations into account and have formulated a working definition of circularity. A circular economy describes an economic system that is based on business models which replace the end-of-life concept with reducing, alternatively reusing, recycling, and recovering materials. We acknowledge that circular economy operates at different levels, not only at the production unit, but it goes to companies, consumers, but also applies to industrial parks, and also to cities, regions, and nations, and of course, to the whole world. The aim of circularity is to accomplish sustainable development. In other words, being circular for the sake of being circular shouldn't be enough. Circular economy should be one element that will help us to create a better world. This means that while achieving circularity, we will create environmental quality, economic prosperity, and social equality for the benefit of the current and the future generations. The concept of circularity, as we discussed at the beginning of this webinar, is not new. It has roots in general systems theory, in limits to growth, in the tragedy of the common. It has elements of industrial and urban metabolism, and also includes elements of design for environment and design for sustainability. Circular economy is influenced by previous concepts as bio-based economy, blue economy, biomimicry, cradle to cradle, industrial ecology, and systems thinking. This webinar is about circular economy, and we don't pretend to go in depth in each one of the topics that we just mentioned. However, it's good to remember the roots of the concept because that will help us to understand how to better apply circular strategies. Briefly, we can say that general systems theory discusses that everything in nature is composed of systems that are both systems themselves or subsystems. That means part of other systems. Limits to growth. What tells us is that natural resources on Earth are finite, and the quest for unlimited growth in population and material goods would eventually lead to a crash. The tragedy of the commons describes the situation of how shared environmental resources are overused and eventually depleted. Industrial or urban metabolism is a metaphor to compare societies or cities to an organism. And because of this metaphor, we can analyze the flows of materials and energy within societies or cities. Design for sustainability or for environment is an approach that focuses on the design process and in the product itself. This approach takes into account environmental, economic, and social concerns. If you are interested in these concepts, at the end of this webinar, you can see some references where you can go in depth. Concerning the influences that the concept of circular economy has, we have biomimicry, which tells us that nature has already solved many of the problems we are facing today. Therefore, it is possible to create nature-inspired designs. The concept of cradle to cradle has three principles. Waste is food. Waste is a resource. We need to use the solar energy that we have. And we need to celebrate diversity. Yes, indeed, we are in one economic system, but we have different needs, we have different resources, and we have different landscape, which includes a different biodiversity. Therefore, when thinking about circularity, we should also understand the context where we want to implement these strategies. Within bio-based economy, biological substances such as wood, sugars, etc., are converted also in value-added products, such as food, feed, bio-based products. This way to looking at nature helps to understand that we can also introduce the concept of circular economy. And as the concept of biomimicry told us, nature is also circular. Nature works in cycles. We can learn from bio-based economy how to develop better circular strategies. The concept of blue economy has also influenced the concept of circular economy, and the blue economy insists on managing resources in a way that is healthy while continuing benefiting society. In other words, we need to take care of not depleting our resources. Industrial ecology is an approach based upon an analogy with ecological systems. Production and manufacturing systems should be thought as closed-loop systems. We have just discussed that the new approach for circular economy is thinking in systems, thinking in loops. And these loops should be closed or as closed as possible. Also, thinking in systems means that every actor in the economy is connected to other actors, and that the actions of one actor influence the others. That is, in a circular system, we need to think in the different stakeholders. We cannot make a circular system only taking actions ourselves. We need to take into account those persons that are before or after us in the value chain. In this slide, you can see the development of circularity concepts and ideals. As you can see, there are many ideas that are precursors of circularity already discussed in the 40s of the previous century. We have been from dealing with waste, which is what we call circularity 1.0, to connecting input and output in strategies for eco-efficiency, to having a reformist view on circularity, and what we have nowadays is a transformational view of circularity, including the global south. Nowadays, the discussion is not anymore on efficiency only, but we include also concepts as ecological civilization, Buddhist, Confucian, and Taoist ecology concepts, for example. This makes the study of circular economy rich and diverse. All these concepts tell us that even though some authors have attempted to define the concept of circular economy, even though our institute, the Copernicus Institute, has formulated a working definition for circular economy, we still need a more consistent definition. For example, we need to incorporate the concept of consumer responsibility. We need to keep pressuring in insisting of important social aspects as social equality. Because nowadays, when we're talking about circular economy, we focus on recycling rates, material use, but still, we need to know and we need to include what the social impact is. What is the benefit for societies of using less resources, of reusing their material, or of reworking their materials? To conclude the message from this module, circular economy is most frequently depicted as a combination of reduce, reuse, and recycle activities. However, not all definitions found in literature explicitly include a waste hierarchy. As we have seen, circular economy means many different things to different people. If we are not aware of the different understanding of circular economy, knowledge accumulation attempts may lead to misleading results. Circular economy must be understood as a fundamental systemic change instead of a bit of twisting of the status quo to ensure its impact. We need to assure that circular economy helps us to achieve the sustainable development that the world requires. An interesting discussion is how to assess, how to evaluate, or how to measure circularity. Once that we have acknowledged that we face a challenge due to the amount of materials that we consume or that we require as society, once that we have acknowledged that even though we have different perspectives on circularity, but we understand that circularity should help us to achieve sustainable development, the next question is, how do we evaluate that? How do we know that we have achieved a circularity process, a circular society, or that we are on the right direction? To start with, various waste management frameworks have been used in academia, as well as practitioners for decades. We have gone from the 3R framework to a 10R framework, which was developed by Dennis Rijke, working at the Copernicus Institute of Sustainable Development. The 3R framework, which you might be familiar with, include reduce, reuse, recycling. We had, with time, 6 Rs, and then we're including a 10R framework, which includes rethinking, which means before taking any action, try to reflect about the system that we are trying to analyze, trying to understand if that is actually a system that we need. Then we have refuse, which is to reflect, or we ask for reflection if we really need the materials that we are asking for. Perhaps we don't need them, or we don't need to consume the materials that we think we need. Then it asks for reduction in the material consumption, or reusing, which means using the materials as much as we can, or repair them. Once a product is broken, instead of buying a new one, just repair it. Refurbish, remanufacture, repurpose, which means using a product for a distinct purpose for what it was designed first. Recycle or recover. What this R framework gives us is a preference, because the higher the R, in rethink and refuse, the more circular we are. And the lower in the framework as recycle or recover energy is the less circular we are. So this framework helps us to understand which aims we should have if we need to be circular. This slide gives you a definition of what each R strategy aims at. Once again, RO, R1, and R2 are the most preferred circular strategies, while R7, R8, and R9 are the less preferable circular strategies. With this, we really have an indication of what we could do to improve any system, any supply chain, and to make it more circular. However, in practice, recycling and recover still dominate policy and the best practices we have. In reality, the R's cannot be separated neatly. A product made of multiple components frequently requires the combination of several R's. Nevertheless, with the R framework, we have an indication of what is the preferred circular strategy. Governments and policymakers, they have a role in enabling mechanisms for a shorter loop value and rotation options, and in directing economic activities towards more circularity. In other words, governments and policymakers should help us understand that we should aim for R's strategies like refusing or rethinking or reducing. Business and practitioners can use their framework as a starting point for evaluating their own opportunity to develop circular business models. If you are thinking about your own process right now, while looking at this framework, you can have an idea where you are situated right now. And also, you can have an idea what is the next step and what you could do. Perhaps you or your company, you already recycle. Well, you are circular on your own right, but you can be even more circular by remanufacturing or repurposing. Or perhaps you are circular in one part of your supply chain. If you recycle, you can think if you can recycle in other parts of your supply chain. What this framework does is opening possibilities for being circular. However, no generally accepted method for assessing circularity has yet emerged. The European Academies of Science, they provide a list with more than 300 indicators that could potentially be used to measure progress in circular economy. And this is not a surprise, because you can think of different indicators for the different R's that we have just discussed. A possible cause for the wide variety of circularity metrics might lay in the unclear and diverse understanding of circularity concept by different stakeholders. As we just saw in the previous unit, circular economy has different roots, different influences, and has had different visions through the decades. Therefore, every vision might attempt to measure its own understanding of circular economy. Dr. Blanca Corona from the Copernicus Institute for Sustainable Development at Utrecht University did a study to understand better how metrics of circularity are done nowadays. Dr. Corona and colleagues, they found that circularity measurement indicate that they are aimed at providing a value expressing how circular a system is. Namely, there are some measures that aim at telling if a process, a society, is between 0 or 100% circular. There are also other tools that they assess the contribution of circular strategies to the circular economy. For this, these assessment tools, they have indicators, the use of single of aggregated scores, or they have assessment frameworks which provide multiple assessment indicators. This slide shows you the variety of tools or methods that you can have to evaluate circularity. The blue dots indicate the methods that are used within products or organizations, and in yellow are tools that have been used to assess the circularity in sectors, regions, or even in the global economy. And you see that some of those have been used for both products or sectors. Some of these tools or methods might be familiar for you. For example, the input-output analysis, the material flow analysis, or the life cycle assessment. There are other new methods, especially developed for circularity, as the circularity index, the circular economic value, CIRC-T. With this variety of methods, the takeaway message from Model 2 that we want to give is that if circular economy is the pathway to sustainability, circular economy efforts should not only focus on material circularity. Indicators based only on material circularity should not be used for sustainable decision-making and are not suitable for global resource use decrease. The major drawbacks that we have found in current metrics is that the scarcity, multifunctionality, material equality, socioeconomic aspects, and a lack of translation into macro indicators. Among all the existing methods nowadays, life cycle analysis is the main tool used to assess progress on circular economy. But using life cycle analysis still poses some methodological challenges. For example, how to deal with quality loss or multifunctionality. And also the lack of socioeconomic and systemic perspective. Once again, and as we have discussed in the previous unit and at the beginning of this webinar, circularity should also deal with the impact for society. And this is a challenge where all of us we can help is to think, to envision ways to assess how circular strategies impact social aspects. Recommendations from us in order to develop circular metrics. Well, we should be comprehensive enough to avoid burden shifting. We should be clear on how to indicate how credits of recycling are allocated. We suggest to build on current frameworks, well-established frameworks, as LCA, MFA of input-output studies. And as much as possible, include social and economic related indicators to the model that you're using to provide a more holistic view. This is a challenge, but also an opportunity, because this opens a big window of opportunity for collaboration among different disciplines that usually might not work together. So trying to include social indicators with environmental indicators is a big opportunity to bring disciplines that usually are working apart and to sit together and to discuss how can we assess circularity and eventually how can we reach sustainable development. We have now discussed the need for circular economy, its definition and some visions, also the challenges that we have in assessing circularity. Now we will discuss the role that one important actor has for circular economy, and this is business. In the previous unit, we suggested that the government should be an actor that help us to have a standardization of the concept of circular economy, right? But now, what is the role of business? How can business help this transition? Well, Dr. Thomas Bowens has been studying this in the last years, and he and his team has developed a typology for circular startups. This means that he has been able to distinguish some characteristics that could help new business to become circular already from the beginning. For this, we need to consider the business model are a key enabler for the shift from a linear to circular economy. This typology distinguishes between 5 circular startup archetypes: design-based, waste-based, platform-based, service-based, and nature-based startups. An interesting finding is that the startups tend to embrace strategies corresponding to higher levels of circularity, as the ones that we discussed with the R framework, than those of incumbents. In these slides, what you can see is the circularity strategies that the startups or incumbents pursue. And you can see that the startups, for example, they focus on reduce. 38% of the startups considered in this study focus on reduce, as 17% of corporates. If we look into the lower R's, for example, recycle or recover, we see that corporates, incumbents, they tend to focus more on these strategies. But how are doing these startups to adopt these higher circular strategies? Where, when talking about design-based startups, they adopt circular innovations in the pre-market phase through source material minimization, product design, or production process efficiency. Waste-based startups, they seek to extract value from unexploited external waste streams. Platform-based startups, they pursue sharing or trading business models which build around B2B, B2C, or C2C marketplaces. Service-based startups, they use embedding products in service systems to increase usage efficiency. And nature-based startups, they increase the delivery of products and services based on nature-based systemic solutions. The Copernicus Institute of Sustainable Development has also studied which barriers exist in the adoption of circular business models. There are 6 main type barriers: financial, organizational, knowledge and technology, supply chain, market, and institutional. This slide gives us examples that were found for each type of barrier. Not only that, we can also see some examples of what different companies have done to overcome the barriers. For example, if the barrier is the market, as we can see in this slide, and the barrier that was mentioned was lack of customer awareness or lack of knowledge and technology, some coping strategies that were mentioned in the research that was done, for example, was the need of outsourcing technical activities or search for knowledge in new sectors. We have already mentioned that circular economy opens a window of opportunity for collaboration within different disciplines. But that is not only valid for academia. as we see in the business community, there's also a need for look for knowledge in other sectors to expand our horizons. Another way to cope with the lack of customer awareness or with the lack of knowledge in technology is to experiment with technology and developing own knowledge. So this research shows the barriers that we have found to implement circular strategies, but also give us hope because business are actually coping and tackling those barriers. Another actor that we have mentioned in this discussion of circular economy is the government, right? Policymakers. Once that we have studied the role of business, we would like to proceed with the governance aspects of the circular economy. How we need to govern in order to promote and implement circular strategies. Within the Copernicus Institute of Sustainable Development in Utrecht University, we have done several studies, and one of those has to do with circular economy and cities. And this study has focused on some circular experiments that some cities have had. Cities are an important aspect of circular economy because they are in a space to experiment with principles and strategies. There are key limitations for circular economy strategies, which relates to the inability to alter value chains, existing value chains, which leads to an over-focus on waste processing, and then lack of focus on consumer behavior, and the tendency or the education that we have to focus on lower R options. The experiences from local actors when trying to foster circular activities is that they usually find an ingrained and embedded linear mindset. There is hesitancy of companies to use circular economy principles. There is a low cost of virgin materials and high cost of labor. And it's difficult to mainstream pilot projects. There are also some strategic limitations to implement circular economy strategies, which limited administrative scope is one of them, limited influence of instruments to compel actors further along the value chain. There is little influence over the private sector, and once again, there is high focus on recycling and waste actors. As we just discussed with experience from local actors, there is a focus on the circular activities as recycling and recovering energy. And there is still little work and research done on consumer behavior. There is also a research that has been done in our institute with focus on the instruments of circular economy. So which experiences have had, in this case, the Netherlands, with extended producer responsibility. In the Netherlands, the extended producer responsibility system includes high collection rates, high recycling and zero landfilling, and clear delineation of actor responsibilities. So this shows that this system is already circular, but if we look at our framework that we discussed in the previous units, this R should not be the most favored. There are other R's that will deliver more in terms of circularity. The weakness of this circular economic system is that the system does not encourage investment and investigation in further higher value recovery options. Assessments of which recovery option is most suitable has not been conducted. And managing exports and leakage is almost non-existent, and there is a lack of monitoring on the destinations. So yes, we recycle. Yes, we have a high collection rate, but we don't know exactly what happens with that waste, in this case of tires, that we have collected. As we can see, what we can learn from the business and the governance aspects of circular economy is that there is still a lot of work to do and a lot of window for collaboration, room for collaboration among different disciplines and stakeholders. Therefore, Utrecht University has put a special emphasis on doing research on circular economy, bringing several scholars from several disciplines to better understand how to implement circular strategies, which eventually will help us to achieve sustainable development. This is only a list of some of the projects that the Copernicus Institute for Sustainable Development has. Every day, we embrace different projects and different opportunities, and I open this moment to ask you for your collaboration. If you, while looking at this webinar or reflecting on the content of this webinar, have an idea or a suggestion for collaboration, please let us know. As we discussed in the first slides, there is not a silver bullet, there's not a single solution, and there are still several things to consider and to include in the circular economy. And the only way to achieve a circular society is through collaboration with different disciplines that perhaps normally they don't come together. Therefore, we are open and we embrace all kinds of collaborations in different sectors. Well, the first current project that we have in Utrecht University with regards to circularity concerns assessing existing circular economy practices and discourses. What is the opportunity that we have seen here? Well, in order to realize the full potential of circular economy, we need to identify crucial barriers for a more systematic implementation of circular economy, right? So then we want to understand the current circular economy discourses and practices across the world. We have seen that there are different views, that circular economy has its root in different concepts and has been influenced by different concepts as well. So we want to understand even more what are the different views that frame the concept. What we are having as a result is a cross-comparison of the discourse in the academic, policy, and business domain, and identification of implications for action. We are identifying key strategies for accelerating the implementation of circularity, and we identify successful policy approaches to promote sustainable practices in less developed countries. The focus of this particular project is in European countries, but also in China and in West Africa. A second project that we have is to understand the transition towards a circular economy and to understand the role of circular startup hubs. The aim is to understand to which extent and in what way do circular startups build ecosystems for their novel products and services. This is relevant because companies, they don't exist on their own. They are part of a bigger ecosystem, and circular economy is about thinking in systems, as we have seen. The future results that we expect is an identification of success factors that enable startups to adopt circular practices. We already have discussed in previous units some barriers that business face while trying to implement circular strategies. And we have also distinguished some coping mechanisms to tackle these barriers. Nevertheless, there should be success factors that startups can use systematically to implement circular practices. Also, we want to understand how startups that focus in circularity from the beginning, how they introduce their products and services. This research has as focus a couple of European countries, as Germany and the Netherlands. The third project on circularity focuses on the built environment in Utrecht in the Netherlands. The Werkspoorkwartier, it's a neighborhood in Utrecht, and the municipality of Utrecht wants to develop this area in a circular creative area. The aim is to improve the business climate of this neighborhood into a leading business location with a space for creative circular manufacturing companies, with an increase in the area of business location and related employment growth among startups, participating companies, and other companies around this neighborhood. The results, which we are working right now, is the realization of an experimental circular testing ground called Hof van Cartesius, with a space for starting creative entrepreneurs. The transformation of one existing building, which is known as the Werkspoorfabriek, into a location for new activities in the area. We also expect to develop a circular hub for innovative and high-quality reuse of materials for construction and furnishing. And we are currently working in the development of a tool that helps policymakers and practitioners to understand the potential and implications of circular strategies within the built environment. Another project where researchers from the Copernicus Institute of Sustainable Development are involved is known as the Nieuwe Meent in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. The Nieuwe Meent is a housing cooperative organized around the principles of communing. The aim is to build a building to be run through a housing cooperative. But this building should be built under certain social and environmental building standards, which the municipality of Amsterdam has set. And among those standards includes that the building should be circular. Therefore, the Nieuwe Meent aims to become the first sustainable self-built housing cooperative in Amsterdam. The future results is to create a space for effective collaboration, knowledge transfer among the different stakeholders, leading to the possibility for implementing new configurations or testing of new materials. Another project where Utrecht University is working is regarding circular fashion. Here, we aim at assessing how the implementation of circular economy strategies affect the quality of jobs, gender equality, and the livelihood of male and female workers in the fashion value chain. As a result of this project, we expect to map circular fashion in the Netherlands, and we also need to recommend strategies for business stakeholders and policymakers aimed at contributing specifically at gender equality, improved livelihoods, and women workers. This project will be carried in the Netherlands, Spain, and India. Another interesting project is on campus, on circular campus. What we want is to identify circular strategies that are applied during different building projects at Utrecht University. And this, of course, relates to the different strategies, to the different projects that we have discussed previously. We want to incorporate the knowledge that we acquire by doing different projects into our own university. We expect to have a decision support system which indicates the environmental and economic implications of circular strategies applied during renovation of buildings. We also focus on circular packaging, where we want to understand the factors that affect the sustainability impact of reusable packaging and decide tools to aid stakeholders in designing reusable packaging systems. Some of the results we have had is reusable packaging, which is more common in business to business. And we will develop a tool to evaluate, again, the potential impacts to move to a reusable packaging system. The tool will be tested in a community of practice of companies that are leading the packaging sector. We would like to finish this webinar with a message for policymakers and remind you the opportunities that we are looking for collaboration. We have seen several aspects of circular economy. Regarding the views and definition of circular economy must be understood as a fundamental systemic change. With regards to the assessing of circularity, circularity economy is a possible pathway to sustainability, but shouldn't be a goal in itself. We also discussed the role of business in the circular economy, and we have seen that one size fits all does not exist. A more fine-grained approach could be useful when developing specific instruments for different circular business models. When it comes to the governance aspects of the circular economy, older systems need to be adjusted to reflect the realities and concerns within the current circular economy debate, namely moving towards sufficiency and higher value rotation options instead of only staying with recycling and energy recovery. Finally, I would like to thank all the contributors for this webinar. You can see their names here. They are researchers, current researchers at the Copernicus Institute of Sustainable Development in Utrecht University. And it has been a pleasure to share the current research that we do at the Institute, and we remind you again our willingness to cooperate. Thank you for your participation and for your attendance to this webinar organized by Climate Kick.